Chapter 15. Lance. Gary and I made it to the lighthouse on Saturday morning. Malcolm was waiting for us. "Morning, gentlemen." We waited for Malcolm to start and began jogging beside him. We headed west, the same way we had last week. Malcolm started with his usual joke. "Gary, how's business? Dig any good holes lately?" Gary forced a smile. "Good and bad." "Okay, give me the bad news first," Malcolm said without missing a beat. "Well, one of my employees, Lance, told me yesterday that he's quitting to start his own company. I can understand that, but what really upsets me is that he is taking 2 of my other employees with him. He never discussed this. And to top it off, he's already got a job lined up. It's one that I had bid on. Lance helped me with the figures, and I know that's how he got the job. He knew just what to bid to undercut me." Gary's escalating voice told me that he was getting upset. When he stopped talking, his jaw clenched. Gary's arms were normally relaxed and his hands were open, but now his arms were stiff and his fists were clenched. Malcolm could also see how Gary was feeling. "Gary, life is not fair. Things like this will happen. You will have challenges." Gary kept running and his feet were pounding against the ground as if he were trying to beat the anger out of his body. Malcolm continued, "You can get angry and hold on to this. If you do that, it'll hold you back. Trust me, it takes a lot of energy to be angry about something. You can be right or you can be happy. Sometimes it's better to let the little things go so that you can be happy." Gary was listening and getting angrier by the step. Or you can accept the fact that this has happened and move forward. You can get bitter or you can get better. I know how difficult this is. I'm not saying it will be easy, but letting go is the better way. No response came from Gary, so Malcolm continued talking. "Gary, I had a very similar thing happen to me. Some of my employees left my business and started their own. They operate just down the street from my building. And there's one more thing. Do whatever you can to help Lance become more successful." "Help him? Why would I want to help him?" Gary said as he forced his body down the path. Needless to say, Gary didn't look too interested in helping Lance. Malcolm continued, "Yes, Gary, I said help him. We're here to make a positive difference in the world. The more people we help, the better our lives will be. Now, let's end this on a happy note. What's the good news?" Gary took a moment and then motioned his head towards me. "I'd like for you to meet my new employee." "You hired Tony? Good move. How do you like your new boss?" "He's great." I meant it. I really did like working for Gary. It was one of the best things to ever happen to me. "How did this happen?" "Well, I tried to find a job at some of the fast food places and stores like you said, but no one would give me a chance. It was really frustrating." Malcolm asked, "Remember what we talked about after you read the book for the first time? About how you are special and there is a purpose to your life?" "Yes." "Tony, no one is going to give you a job. You have to go out and find work that needs to be done. You have to create opportunity." We kept heading east along the jogging trail. I wasn't having as difficult a time keeping up as I did last week. We were able to stay together much more easily. "Gary, aren't you glad you didn't take that money out of your savings?" "Yeah," said Gary with a quick laugh. "You were right again, Malcolm. Having that money set aside is important, and you should not touch it, except for something really important. I just knew that some other solution would come along. It always does." I was able to follow the conversation much better this week. I was convinced that Malcolm knew a lot. He seemed to have wisdom, and he was open to sharing his knowledge with Gary and me. We ran the same course we had last week, but to me it seemed new. Last week I'd been too busy forcing my legs to move to see the details of where I was. This time I was able to see a pair of fishermen sitting on the bank of the lake and a foursome getting ready to hit the golf course. We were on the west side of the lake now. I was beginning to enjoy the experience. "Tony, there's something important I want you to do," Malcolm said. Yes, sir. I understood that whatever Malcolm told me to do would help me. This week, after you get paid, I want you to go to the bank. You need to take 10% of your paycheck and open a savings account. Whenever you get paid, you take 10% of that and put it into your account. In other words, 10 cents of every dollar goes into a savings account. Do you understand? I nodded. You need to leave that money alone. There are going to be times when you think you need to take that money out, but don't do it. Don't spend it on anything without talking to me about it first. You heard how Gary thought he needed to take out some of his savings. Then he found another solution. Just remember, you can always find another way to resolve your problem other than taking money out of savings. Okay, I was happy to do it. If Malcolm said it was important and Gary was doing it, so would I. We continued north along the west side of the lake and then followed the trail east. I saw a large wooded park on the left side of the dam, something else I had not noticed last week. As we went further west, I could see kites flying. Whoever was flying them was near the boat club. Malcolm, Gary, and I kept the same pace. No one had to slow down this time. We hit the east side and stayed on the trail until it ran into the parking lot by the lighthouse. I followed Malcolm and Gary to Malcolm's car. We stopped, and once again Malcolm reached into his Lexus and pulled out bananas and water. We drank and snacked without much talk. Malcolm gave me another book. This one was called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Tony, part of being a successful business owner is having the proper attitude. This book will help you get and keep the right attitude towards success. I took the book and thanked him. Well, it's time to go, Malcolm said after checking his watch. He shook hands with Gary and me and left. Gary said this had been Malcolm's routine for years, to run at 6 a.m. on Saturday at the lighthouse on Lake Hefner. Malcolm had routine in his life, but he never seemed bored. All kinds of things were changing in Malcolm's life. His family was growing, he had new friends, his business was expanding, and he got to travel and take vacations to different places. Even with all this change, he always kept routine. Malcolm was, and still is, the most interesting person I have ever met. Gary and I walked back to Gary's truck. Gary had been silent for some time, and he didn't speak until we were almost home. Good run, huh, Tony? I could tell that Gary was talking just to make conversation. His mind was far away. I guess I have to find some way to help Lance, he said. Once we reached the house, Gary made a phone call. Yes, sir, this is Gary. I put in a bid on the job you've got Monday. I'm calling about Lance, the guy who did get the job. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was Gary about to badmouth Lance after Malcolm had told him to help? Well, I just wanted you to know that he's worked for me the last year. Here it comes, I thought. Gary continued, he's a great worker, really dependable. You made a good decision in hiring him. There was another pause while the person on the other end of the line spoke. Well, I just wanted to tell you this because I know it's his first job. He's going to do a great job for you. Yes, sir. You have a great day. Gary hung up the phone and walked into the living room. I could see how relieved he was. It was the most relaxed Gary had looked since he and Lance had talked. Gary sighed, made something to eat, and sat down at the table to eat. On Sunday morning, I was awake and ready by 8 a.m. The only problem was that I didn't have anywhere to go. After making some cereal, I read. My mind was clean and alert, more so than I could ever remember. Gary came to the kitchen and ate a quick breakfast. He told me he had errands to run. I sat and thought while Gary was out. I had become so much happier since I had met Malcolm, but I wasn't sure why. Then it hit me. For the first time in my life, I felt like there was someone who cared about me and had a plan for me. That there was someone who was not only going to tell me how to be successful, but would also show me. Malcolm was going to give me the same guidance that he'd been giving Gary, and with the same effort, I could be successful like Gary. For the first time in my life, I had a mentor. This realization gave me peace. Gary returned that afternoon. He and I were both in good spirits. Man, I feel great. I could hardly contain my enthusiasm. My body feels great, and my brain, it's like somebody took it out and cleaned it. Gary laughed. It's the running. When you run, your body releases chemicals called endorphins. The word endorphins comes from the word morphine, which tells you endorphins are pretty powerful. That's why you feel so good. Cool. I didn't know I was a walking pharmacy. Gary smiled and continued, if you run 4 times a week at a reasonable pace for 30 minutes at a time, you will feel like that all the time. Malcolm and I run every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. The Saturday run is together, but the other 3 days we run by ourselves. I had seen Gary leave the job site early on a few days, and now I knew why. I decided right then I would run 3 days a week by myself, too.